What I want to talk about a little bit is the framing of the question. Okay, so we'll get back to the Shari Yasher, and I do want to get back to the Shari Yasher, but we took a little deviation last week. Talk a little bit about what the real question is. I mean, really trying to understand what the real question is. See, in many ways, people's perception of Bechira, okay, which is at the root of a lot of issues, a free choice, is usually perceived to be a simplistic battle between a good drive and an evil drive. Okay, there's a drive that's, you know, like the way the cartoons are, the little devil and the little angel, right? So everyone says there's the evil drive and then there's the good drive, and the point is you should follow the good drive and not follow the evil drive. That's the way most people perceive the concept of free choice. And then the answer to that conflict is pick the good drive, right? So therefore, there's a simple answer, which is like always the good drive. The problem is that defining what is really good and what's evil is not so simple. And perceiving drives as always good or always evil is also, you know, it's not so simple. In many ways, it's almost trying to define what is really going on and what is the real good drive, and, or what's really the correct drive, the incorrect drive, or whatever, is part of the problem. I know you guys haven't heard me really quote this. Maybe me, I did once or twice in the previous show. I for a while was a real Trekkie. Okay, I loved the TV show Star Trek, especially the original series.
So you're saying you're not a Star Trek fan anymore?
No, I still am to some extent, but not like other people are, but so forth. But there's a Star Trek show from the original series, which is a very powerful show.
Shatner.
Yes, it's Star Shatner. But the show basically was that something happened. There was something that happened where they went back in time and so forth and so forth, and the whole reality changed. And somehow they found out that this whole reality changed because Hitler did not lose the Second World War. Okay?
That's a big thing.
So this completely changed the reality, whatever. And it all came down to trying to figure out, okay, so there was someone who went back in time and changed reality because of what this person did. It meant that Hitler would win the Second World War. So Kirk and Spock had to go back in time to prevent, and it was McCoy who went back the first time, who had to prevent McCoy from doing this thing that would change all of history. What they figured out what it is there was a woman who ran a pacifist organization. Okay? And in the pacifist organization, she was arguing that America should stay out of the Second World War, and that she's pacifist, and so forth and so forth. And she became strong enough that she delayed America getting into the war. She delayed everything. Of course, it's an American TV show, so if America didn't enter the war, America would have, would change everything. Although most people say it's not so simple it's not so simple that Britain already was on the way of winning with Russia already. Okay, when America joined in. But the fact is, right. But the fact is that what happened is because she ran this pacifist organization, that it meant that the whole that she was able to get America not to join the war, and eventually Hitler won. Okay. So what happened is that she was supposed to die in a car accident, right? And what happened was McCoy saved her, pulled her out of the way at the last minute. So what had to happen was that Kirk has to hold back McCoy from saving this woman who was going to get killed in this car accident. So the whole show the show climaxes with the point where this car is speeding they hit the woman. McCoy's about to go out there and save her, and Kirk is holding McCoy back, and what happens is the woman gets killed, and therefore America joins the war and Hitler's defeated. Okay, so it's okay. Now the truth is because she's a pacifist, it's a lot of Rahmanis, oh, she's a pacifist is a good thing, so forth and so forth. There's also something to do with Star Trek. There was an insight I wrote also about, I think his name is Wordsworth. Wordsworth was the founder of the CCF here in Canada, which is a political party, which is the forerunner to the NDP. Okay, Wordsworth, when Canada declared war on Germany in the 1930s, Wordsworth was the one member of Parliament who voted against the declaration of war, because he was a pacifist. War is always wrong, and the fact is that the story goes that after they took the vote, other people in the Commons came over and shook Wordsworth's hands. He stood by his principles. He's a pacifist. He stood by his principles. People came over and congratulated him for taking a stand. And what I wrote in my insight was, if it was me, I would go over and slug the guy. Why? Because the fact is that most people understand good and evil in terms of just the emotions and the drives. Good and evil is actually an intellectual concept. It's an understanding of what's really going on there.
It's not emotion.
It's connected to the emotions, but the fact is the final determination of what you should do, of what really is the correct decision. And the fact is that the Jewish model is much more complex than the simplistic model. But the fact is, it's an integration of thought and the emotions.
Right. Because when we most of our actions, or at least most of the things that are actions that are wrong, are mostly based on emotional drive or some sort of
the fact is
overrides.
But the point is, that's true.
It's still emotional.
But the point is that the ultimate decisions you're making are also tied to certain intellectual perceptions of reality. The fact is if you really understood all the consequences of your behavior, right, then you might make different decisions.
Like
the fact is that the decisions you make have a lot to do with emotions, but a lot to do with your ideas. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, of course, people are pacifists. Do you like going to war? No. People who go to war will tell you war is hell. That's right. Does that mean that the right decision is always to say, I'm not going to war? No, because there are times that you have to take this type of action. The point is like, can you always make a blanket statement that war is wrong, pacifist? I saw like ban the A-bomb they had in the 50s. Ban the A-bomb. Right. Well, the point is that if you're concerned that someone is going to have the A-bomb who you're concerned about, then you're not going to ban your own A-bomb because you need it yourself. You can't, the idea of war is always wrong.
If you have an A-bomb, you're not going to care about a ban.
No, the point is you're always going to say, the fact is war always wrong? You don't want to go to war, but unfortunately there are certain situations that you do have to go to war.
Right.
I mean, this became a whole issue with Muhammad Ali when he didn't want to be drafted, because if you're a conscious objector, it's okay if you're against every war. And Muhammad Ali kept saying, I got no problems with the Vietnamese, so why do I want to go to war with them? The fact is, he didn't make the statement that he was totally against war. The point is that what? No, the fact is that the point is that war is not is generally, you don't like that option, but if that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do.
Wow.
The point is that people. So I was trying to say to the guy Wordsworth, him coming out and saying, I'm a pacifist, even in conjunction with someone like a Hitler, that's not Yetzer Tov, that's Yetzer Hara. Now, is it totally emotional? No. It's emotional and intellectual, yes. It's a connection of thought and emotions. The fact is how you make decisions are much more complex than most people think. It's not just the little devil and the little angel. There are situations where this is appropriate and situations where that is appropriate. Yeah, there's certain emotions that you have that generally, if you have to follow that emotion, that's the better emotion to follow. But the fact is, it may not be that this is always the right emotion to follow. And that's something, and that what that comes down to is the idea to try and really define the circumstances and the facts and the situation, and that yields a different type of decision. And a lot of times when we talk in terms of bechira is not just a matter of making a decision between, emotions and so forth. A lot of it has to do with how you're perceiving the situation, how you're perceiving the case, how are you defining things. And a lot of the difficulties that are encountered is the fact that your definition is somewhat not that you're having problems with absolutely defining the circumstances. Now, there's another problem. One of the problems I find that a lot of people have is that they've been given simplistic answers to things, simplistic perceptions of good and evil, and then when they encounter reality, they find out that those perceptions are what they really find is those perceptions are incorrect, and you can't apply simplistic perceptions of good and evil in the real world. So you have something in the back of your mind where you've been taught, where some rabbi tells you A is right in this situation, and then you're out there in the real world and you're finding out that, hey, there's something doesn't feel right about this conclusion. But if you go further and you really investigate the facts, and you actually really investigate the halacha, you find out that the simplistic understanding was really incorrect. That really there is a greater understanding of the reality here, and a bigger understanding of what's going on over here, and then there is also a perception of what the right thing is to do or not. So let me give you an example of this from a halachic perspective. Let's say there's a woman who is not Jewish, who is attracted to a Jewish guy, okay? Attracted to a from Jewish guy, and she then says, "I'd like to convert," right? And go to rabbis and say, well, you just want to convert for marriage. No, it's bad. It's not a good reason to convert, and so forth and so forth. The fact is, you look at the case a little bit more closely, and you find out that the reason she was attracted to this from Jewish guy was because of all the positive midos of this person, and that what she encountered in this from Jewish guy was a personification of Torah values. So you find out that she actually has some type of
noble intention
of attraction to Torah. And she saw this attraction to Torah through the behavior of this individual and through this idea of this individual. So the point is, now this case is not so far-fetched, okay?
Right.
The fact of the matter is that Rav Amram Blau, okay, Rav Amram Blau was the head of the Torah Karta in Eretz Yisrael, okay? And I'm not exactly sure where, but he was sick, so forth, and he was actually in a hospital and so forth and so forth, and there were nuns who were the nurses. And one of the nuns, who was a nurse, was so enthralled by Rav Amram, and so overtaken by the Midas Rav Amram, she actually left the church and went on an investigation of Torah. Eventually she converted. Nothing to do with Rav Amram. Nothing to do with Rav Amram, she converted. Years later, it turned out that she ended up marrying Rav Amram. Okay? There's a whole story about this, but the fact of the matter is that it started, there was no connection during her Geirus, so there was no connection with Ramro, but the fact is that what led her on the path towards, from what I understand, what led her on the path towards Yiddishkeit was she was so enthralled with Rav Amram when she was taking care of him, and by his behavior, and so forth and so forth. It wasn't the guy, it was the guy as a example of what Yiddishkeit should do for a person. And the fact is that there are people who say this, is that if Frum Yidden actually acted the way Frum Yidden would act, then the world would be enthralled with them. The fact is that there's statements like that you know that you if you're you know, like Rakam Chacham B'Navon, the nations world will see you like this, and so forth and so forth. Yet, you know, but you know, the fact is that if you're acting a certain way, you're going to attract people to Torah. Okay, now the point is that the case I gave you in terms of Geirus, people say, no, you can't. The fact is that what happens if this woman actually was attracted to Torah, and now it leads her to a situation, in this situation with you know, can she get married if she's Megayer and so forth to this guy and so forth. But it can't just define her motivation as you know, attraction to the guy. She sees in this person a certain hanhaga of what Torah is about, and that leads her on the path of understanding Torah. So that's an example of what I mean by seeing beyond the facts. The point is, a simplistic answer, a simplistic statement, misses that perspective. Now the truth is, a lot of times when you ask questions about Bechira, you ask questions about free choice and so forth, you have to understand what really is the free choice. And you have to look at your drives and you sit there and say, listen, every drive has its place. Every drive has its motivation. Every drive has its proper manifestation and so forth. So the truth is that what happens a lot of times is an understanding of how to put together the puzzle, okay, and to understand where you want to go. And a lot of people try to answer questions by very strong black and white answers. And the fact is that those black and white answers end up with people basically thinking that that's free choice, and then they're left with a situation where the conclusion doesn't make sense. The conclusion is left with this is the Eitzor and this is the Eitzor, but the conclusion is this and this good, and this what's coming out of it seems to be a good thing. So what is it? And you find out that what really is the Eitzor and the Eitzor, right? The fact is, you find out that it's a little bit more complex. Now, you want to follow what I'm saying, that it's a little bit more of not just your drives. It's understanding what is the reality. Why is it that you don't want to do this? Why is it that you want to do this? You know, and also you have to understand your own psychology. And a person said before about addiction, right? The fact of the matter is that not everything is in your power, right? That's the reality. The free choice is not.
Well, you can fight addiction.
Pardon?
You can fight addiction.
But it's not going to happen in a minute. You're not going to fight. You're not going. The fact is then the choice is not right now. The choice is what steps am I going to do to try and work this out. So the point is that the call is not for you to do this behavior right now. The call is for you to take the steps so that you're able to do this behavior down the road. The same with. But the fact is the same with other aspects. A lot of times we see conclusions, or we see the results of our behavior, and we don't, and we say, well, I like these results, and then I'll regret afterwards. And a lot of times it's because you're not really understanding right now the full results of that behavior, because the fact is the tie-in is not there, and you don't really understand what's really the problem with the more negative idea. Yeah, you sort of have been emotionally told that it's a bad thing, but you don't really have the full understanding of what the problem is down the road. So I mean the thing is that there's a lot of a need to redefine situations, redefine the facts, redefine the drives, redefine what really is right, what really is wrong. And in certain ways, what I have found is that when you are given the full spectrum of halachic understanding and you're able to work through things, it actually opens up new perspectives. What happens is with a lot of people use halacha to actually try and create blinders, and usually I find that that's not really what halacha should be doing. Halacha actually opens up new perspectives. You find, like, for example, like there's so many issues, and you find this with halachic perspectives and so forth. You take the Supreme Court of Canada just made a decision about euthanasia, about
giving up
medically assisted suicides for people who are in what?
Like in a coma or something.
Well, no, even more than that. People who are concerned about pain, if they're able to die naturally, and so forth and so forth. Now, the truth is that there is a problem with euthanasia. Clearly, there's a problem with euthanasia. But the fact is, if you really do a study of the sources, you find a very interesting perspective. That is, as much as there's clear-cut halachic concepts about euthanasia, you also find that there is a tremendous sensitivity to quality of life and pain, you know, and prolonged pain in someone who is in dying process. So the fact is that halacha has a concept of passive euthanasia, that you don't do things to prolong, according to the Rabbi, you don't do things to prolong a life that is just in suffering. Okay, so the point is you're sensitive to that kind of perspective. Now, the fact is that usually yields a tremendous dialectic in the individual. On one hand, ending a life early is misa. On the other, it's murder. You don't want to be committed murder. But on the other hand, you want to have, you also want to have sensitivity to the situation, not just prolong a person in agony, also chesed. And this becomes a big issue where individuals usually feel both sides of the coin, and both sides of the coin are what you would call yetzer tovs, being sensitive to another person's pain and being sensitive to the quality to the concept of life. So a lot of times, you know, to define it as yetzer tov and yetzer hara is really not, it's really incorrect. It's a definition of really a battle in the yetzer tov, which means what the battle is what's good. And there's an interesting example of this, when I say dialectic, that's a term that's considered to be Hegelian, which is a term of Hegel as a philosopher of contrary values in time. But there's a classic line, and I saw it in Emanuel Jacobowitz's book on Jewish medical ethics. Lord Jacobowitz is chief rabbi of England. His big thing was Jewish medical ethics, and I think he wrote the first book on the subject. And in it he quotes a medrash. There's a medrash that says, "Hatov berofim legehenim." The best doctors go to hell. Okay?
It's not a Gemara.
Okay? Is it Gemara? It might be Gemara. It might be Gemara. It's a classic line. Hatov berofim.
Also.
What?
Lawyers also.
No, well, no. Tov berofim.
Anyway,
Let's focus on this. Hatov berofim legehenim. The best doctors, the good doctors, go to hell. So the classic understanding of that is that it's the best doctors, talking about the really qualified doctors, basically go to Gehenna because they become arrogant. They say, "I saved the patient," and they don't accept the fact that the Kodesh Baruch Hu is really behind everything. So, Hatov berofim, really, really good doctors, can become arrogant, and therefore they go to Gehenna because of their arrogance, thinking they're the ones who save the patient. They don't give Hodah to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's the classic. It's a classic understanding of Hatov berofim Gehenna. There's another sheet that says like this:
that the sailors go to heaven.
Wait a sec. Hatov berofim legehenim. The best doctors go to hell. Why? Because the best doctors, the really caring doctors, see a person who's dying in agony, and because of their compassion, right, they'll commit euthanasia, which is Ritzicha. So the best doctors, i.e. the most compassionate doctors, there's a problem that they may be so compassionate that they'll actually kill someone. That's what the Gemara is informing us. But the fact is, it's telling you, first of all, it's telling you compassion in that situation would be incorrect, because the halacha still says it's murder, but the fact is it's still compassion. So the truth is...
Did you say before that, from Torah, that you tried to not allow someone to have pain, you would end their life?
You wouldn't end your life. The fact is that it becomes...
Like, with the insect, it's in pain, suffering, you kill
it. Right. The fact is that there's an idea in halacha that there is a attempt to try and see how halachically, like for example, passive euthanasia, which is defined as removing the impediment to death, right? Okay, so the point is removing the impediment to death, okay, is different than a euthanasia. Okay, so the fact is that you might have a question like this, like questions emerge like this, is that how far do you have to go to keep someone alive? So you have someone who's in tremendous pain and so forth and so forth. Do you have and you have a situation where if something happens and they need to be resuscitated, whatever, do you resuscitate them if they're already in a terrible, painful situation? So there are people who will know, because that's not active euthanasia, that's passive euthanasia. That what it is that what you're doing is you're not doing something. Person is in the process of dying, and now you're doing something to keeping him alive. Okay, but you're just keeping him alive in a situation where he's in terrible agony. So the point is, at that point in time, there are people who say don't do that. The point is, what you find in halacha is that the compassion that you have to quality of life, okay, the compassion you have to quality of life is significant. But you see, what I'm trying to say is that in that situation, compassion becomes compassion is generally a good thing. There's a side to it that says that compassion can lead someone to commit murder, and that's a problem. Okay? Because the fact is that you cannot actively commit euthanasia. However, you have to understand what's the motivation. The motivation is a drive to compassion. So what I'm trying to say is defining compassion always as Yetzer Tov would be problematic. The fact of the matter is drives whether they are the drives you should follow or not follow are dependent upon the situation. And the situation has a lot of halachic considerations. So the fact is that a person is compassionate and commits euthanasia, that compassion can be a problem. The point is with every drive that we have, every interest we have, that's why it's not just emotional. It's a matter where you have a feeling, and generally there's certain feelings which are generally the ones you should follow, like compassion is usually a feeling you should follow, but it's not always 100%. And there's other feelings that we have that generally tell you not to follow, but there's other times you should follow it. The point is that that's why he brings it into the intellect in terms of really trying to see the situation, and then in trying to see the situation, then you try and see, okay, what really is right and wrong, and then it comes in a more complex definition of really trying to find out what is wrong, what's right. So I gave you two examples: pacifism and compassion, which are generally we would define to be good drives, and the fact is that they are not. That doesn't mean you 100% follow them. And then there's other situations where something which you consider to be something that's not a drive to be followed or something like that. You find in those situations the drive should be followed, right? So the point is that there's a lot of issues like that, and the point is that really tells you that the analysis is you have to use your head, you have to use analysis, and then you also have to make much more complex decisions of the situation. So you see what I'm getting back in terms of bechira and free choice is I'm getting back that usually a lot of times really understanding what the issues are is a lot of time part of the problem. A lot of times we make decisions very simply, and we're told to make decisions simply. We're taught to make decisions simply. We're taught that here's the Yetzer Tov and here's the Yetzer Hara, and the fact is that then it leads to things where we start having problems with it. And then you find out that maybe things aren't defined so simply. And maybe if you saw it much more complex and you allowed the fullness of the halacha to come out, then you would see a much more you would see a much broader understanding of the situation, and you would come to different conclusions.
Where would you say the problem with like in whatever in Judaism, that there are people who end up coming up with these wrong conclusions, or and so widespread within Judaism that they're
a lot of times
it wrong,
it's because
whatever.
What would be an example of that?
Like a bunch of rabbis that say it a certain way, and everyone widespread
a lot of times the proper decision takes a lot of thought. Okay? The fact of the matter is what free choice ultimately is about is decision making. Very, very, very extensive decision making, using halacha as the major yardstick of that decision making, and halacha itself being most complex, because it's not just monolithic. Halacha has a lot of different perceptions and shittas and perspectives. What happens is that a lot of people really do not think that the average person is able to make correct decisions.
A lot of people are the average person.
Pardon?
A lot of people are the average person.
But the fact is, a lot of times, so therefore, what they feel is necessary is to give people a simple model that they hope will work most of the time, and will work most cases, for most people, in most cases, most of the time, and not yield and not yield too much damage. Let me, yeah.
I have a reflection back on his question as an example.
Yeah.
To use the halacha regarding a get. Like the decision was made that only men can give a get to a woman, and they run into a problem that we have now, and nobody wants to.
Well, the problem is that see, from halachic perception, that's not a decision. That's exeris akasa. That's an edict from God that a get must be initiated by the male. Okay. The fact is how you deal with it. Okay. So that is a halachic problem. What occurs is that when the Jewish world had its own authority over its own basis, if Beis Din came out and said you should give a get, the guy who didn't get a get would basically be taken aside and said, listen, your wife will not be married by sunset. They'll take the guy aside and say, listen, your wife's going to be single by the end of the day. Your choice is whether she's going to be a widow or a divorcee. That's basically your choice.
Right.
Okay? And then they give him a little bit of a talk using parts of their body rather than... Yeah, now you'd be arrested by that. But the fact of the matter is that's what happened. That's what happened back when you had autonomous authority there. Now the truth is, get is a situation. But you see, the point is that halacha is the true spectrum of halacha and the true understanding of halacha. The way it is a lot of times is because halacha, a lot of a world involves decision making, and if you don't think people can make proper decisions, or you think people will corrupt their decisions, like a lot of times with halacha, there is the point of not letting people know the full spectrum of halacha because they'll corrupt it. Like for example, on hair covering. Okay, the full spectrum of halacha on hair covering is a wide spectrum of shittas, from that women do not have to cover their hair at all, period, today, to that women have to totally cover their hair, and if they're wearing a wig, they still have to wear another hat on top. There's a wide spectrum of halachic opinions. The point is that if you went out there and said, "Here's the choice," the point is, and it was presented that here's all the halachic choices. What do you want to do? Then everyone will say, I like this one, I like that one. Well, the truth is, halacha is not decided through I like. Halacha is its own methodology in how you make decisions. So the point is that obviously, if you have a sheet over here, but the majority of opinions is this opinion over there, then if you're being halachically honest, you're going to understand, well, the majority has more voice of what is the correct halacha, rather than an individual shita. So the truth is, there's a process of making correct halachic decisions. So if you don't believe that people are, if they're given a true understanding of the spectrum, they're going to make correct halachic decisions. Therefore, you're going to try and hide the spectrum from them. That's an example of it. So the point is, that a lot of times, if you don't trust that people can make proper decisions, you're basically going to only give them a narrow presentation, so they will make the decision which you think is correct. The problem with that is that it may work in most situations, but in a lot of situations, a person doesn't understand the full spectrum of how halacha looks at something, will not be able to always get it right
or value it.
That's true. Also, in terms of truly value the situation. Like a lot of times, people are told certain halachos, and in terms of kashrus, and they end up throwing out things that were totally mutter. And then they come to me and say, we threw this out. Well, I said, why? It was totally mutter. It's baltashkas. It was totally mutter. It was wasting food. And the fact is that well, I thought it was ulcer. Well, I should have asked the Shiloh. But why not? I was told it was clearly ulcer. Well, the truth of the matter is that and your situations where Price made a statement of a big difference in America versus Europe, and somehow people come to America and in Europe, you recognize that if you ushered the chicken, the person can't just. This was the Friday night meal, and they only had meat once a week. Right. And here's the chicken Friday night meal, and this is the person's meat for the week, and you usher it. You'll be very, 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 very cautious before you usher it, because you recognize that the person. This is the person's. What? The show.
They do that with everything. Okay, like disposable. Right. Just use disposable.
Right. So the fact is that. But the fact is people don't understand that full movement. Like I've had situations where, talk about women and hair covering. A situation where a woman who was divorced and she no longer wanted to cover her hair, and the actual statement in Shulchan is a divorced woman should cover her hair. Prima facie, right? This woman didn't want to cover her hair, and she had reasons she didn't want to cover her hair. So she spoke to me about it and so forth and so forth. I didn't want to paskin for her because I felt that she needed a broader. And the truth of the matter is that in these type of situations, I said, go get someone who paskins for you. I said, listen, check it out, find people. Go get someone who's like, when he paskins, no one's going to question you anymore about this. And go and see what you say. So she actually got in touch with a major posik from New York City. And this major posik paskin that she didn't have to cover her hair anymore.
So divorced women.
No, not divorced. You see, that's already the problem. The problem when you say divorced women, she was told she didn't have to cover her hair, even though she was divorced. Does that mean this other divorced woman doesn't have to cover her hair? No. That means this was a stock for her. Okay? So the fact is that you understand the differences. Why? Because it all gets down to the details. So a friend of hers told her, yeah, you got a heter, but that's not really what God wants. It's not really the right thing to do, and so on and so forth. So then she came back. So I spoke to her about this. I actually wrote a direct line with God. Yeah. So I actually wrote an article in our at the time we were putting out a magazine called Introspection. Wrote an article about heter, and the fact is you don't recognize that sometimes when there's a heter, the heterim are actually it's not just a heter that you're not strong enough, therefore there's a leniency. No, the fact is that this heter is what you should be doing.
Right.
Okay, because this is in line with your psychology, this is in line with your needs, this is in line with other things, and so forth and so forth. So therefore, the fact is that when this posting paskin that she no longer had to cover her hair, she took in a full situation and said, hey, this is what's correct for you at this time, because you have other concerns. Okay, now one of her concerns was that she felt she felt good enough about herself so that she could be involved in future shidduchim. Okay, and that was a consideration. Okay, a lot of times you find people who divorce women, if they continue covering their hair, they have a hard time with being able to see themselves in further shidduchim. She was having this issue. So the point is that it's an example of the fullness of the situation. See, what I'm trying to say is that looking at the full breadth of the situation. And there's so many other cases like this. I can go on and on with so many cases where basically knowing the situation, knowing the full spectrum, knowing that the drives that are involved, the dialectic is usually not it's not the little devil and little angel. It could be two good drives. Yeah.
So we spoke about in the original Shirin back in the day.
Yeah.
Some of the original people, some of the people were there. The good old days. That Shulchan Aruch isn't the be all and end all, because everyone will say, okay, it says it in Shulchan Aruch, how could you say otherwise? And they'll be like flat out, this is Shulchan Aruch. So in reality, when you're doing a paskening, are there things about, like, how does it work? Is there things above Shulchan Aruch? Are there?
No, I mean the Shulchan Aruch. You see, the Shulchan Aruch. When we say Shulchan Aruch, I mean the text that we have, the Shulchan Aruch, has within it. There's Beis Yosef's opinion, the Ramah's opinion. Then you have the Shacht's opinion, the Taz's opinion, the Drad's opinion.
Right.
We have Akiva Eger's opinion. Okay, then you have B'Shari Tshuva's opinion, the Ber Hecht, then you have the CHABURA's opinion, the Or Chaim. I mean, the fact of the matter is that halacha is a methodology of decision making.
So it's not just Yosef Karo, Ramah, and then like.
No, what happens is that all of halacha is decision making. Okay, when we read a Shulchan Aruch, when we read any book of laws, that law. Let's say straightforward ability, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. That's Shlomo Gottfried's decisions in halacha. So he writes it down, and the fact of the matter is, like the Rambam, the Rambam is the first code, and the Rambam wrote like, here is the law. The truth of the matter is, the Rambam went back to the Gemara and he made decisions, and he didn't write down the law as this is the legislation that was enacted. He came to the conclusion, based upon his analysis of the Gemara, that this is the law. And then you have the Rabbi sometimes basically saying, listen, the way I read the Gemara is I got this is something else to be the law. Yeah. It's all decision making. But I'm not just talking about decision making within halacha. I'm talking perceiving the facts and also understanding the fullness of what we understand to be Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Tov. When you have a disagreement in halacha and you look beyond it, the fact of the matter is that usually you find that the drives that are involved, they see that this drive has value and that drive has value, and how do you balance these two drives? And it's difficult coming down to decisions. And a lot of times with what you call free choice, it's a difficult decision-making process. And it's usually a lot of times when people, come up with a lot of, straightforward answers about things, it's usually that they have a very simplistic understanding of the situation. And by the way, this is not to try and be matter things. A lot of times, halacha basically does have its parameters. It does have very strong parameters in our society. The proper, let's say, in our society, the proper halachic behavior between males and females is completely contrary to the values of our society. So that's going to create difficulty. The point is that in our society, see, you look in terms of our society, it's so easy to basically perceive all these people as just, in most simplistic terms, but a lot of time they're talking about values which we are considerate about. They're talking about values of caring or love, and a lot of the situation is that there's a lack of real understanding of what's going on. The point is that you have answers are often not simple, and the fact is that halacha makes you have to make analysis and things and makes you struggle with it. I mean, Purim is coming, and I'll give you a powerful example. Esther. There's a whole view in the Gemara that Esther was married to Mordechai, right? Okay, so basically she was forced to be with Achashverosh, right? The whole time she was obviously forced, okay? Never her choice, she was forced. A married woman who's raped is not usher on her husband, okay? A woman who has an adulterous affair can no longer live with her husband, But if she's forced to, then she can't. Okay, then she's it's okay. She can stay with her husband. So so the point is that Esther's being forced.
Is there an opinion that she didn't actually have relations with?
Yeah, there's a Tosis like that.
And that like she exchanged some bodies.
Yes, that's Tosis. There's a shade that took her place. It's Tosis' position. Okay, but let's go with my position right now, with my view. Right, let's go with this viewpoint. So the fact is that the Gemara says that when Esther went in to Achashverosh, when Mordechai says go to Achashverosh and save the Jewish people, she initiated contact with Achashverosh. Now she was Achashverosh's wife. She hadn't seen Achashverosh in a month. She wasn't going in to just have coffee with Achashverosh, right? So she initiated contact with Achashverosh. So if you notice, when we read the Megillah, right, at that point in time, she says, Kasher avadati, what happens to me, what I will lose, I will lose. So it's read in the tone of Eicha, okay? Because it represents Esther's own lamentations, because she was initiating contact with Mordechai. She was initiating contact with Achashverosh. Therefore, because she initiated contact, she would now be usher on Mordechai. She could no longer remain Mordechai's. She could no longer really be Mordechai's wife. Okay, if somehow she was able to get away from Achashverosh, she would not be able to live with Mordechai. So she says, Kasher avadati. So there's a lot of issues on this. How could Esther do it? Halachic arguments, so forth and so forth. It's a whole halacha. It's discussed in the Gemara and so forth and so forth. There's other arguments. But the point of the matter is it's a tragic story. It's a tragic story of love. Right? Esther basically sacrificed her love. Now the fact of the matter is that love is expressed in other things in the Gemara. It says in other places, whenever Esther prior to that was actually slept with Achashverosh, it says that after she would sleep with Achashverosh, she would go to Mordechai. Okay, now how this worked out and how this happened in the castle and so forth and so forth, I don't know. But the fact is that she slept with Hecht Shel Mordechai. Okay, in other words, when she was raped by Achashverosh, right, in order to find some solace, she went and lied with Mordechai, which implies a physical relationship. Now, the fact of the matter is that love is tied to physicality and so forth and so forth. That's clearly there. And here Esther makes a remarkable sacrifice and basically is giving up her love and so forth. Now, the truth of the matter is that not perceiving that all these cases talk about a person is to understand it. You have to understand it within the context of our humanity. Okay, physical love, connection, so forth and so forth. It's all part of the understanding of the story, and it's very tragic. So the truth is the halacha sometimes very demanding, strict? Is it always have? Are we always in line with that conclusion halacha will reach? Obviously, in the case of every aguna, where the aguna situation is one which we feel very bad about, but the bottom line is that that's halacha whatever. So I'm not trying to belittle the strictness of halacha and so forth and so forth. I'm not going to give heterim which are not heterim. But the point is to not understand the fullness of the situation and to describe things in very simplistic ideas. And I mentioned this last week to declare every intermarriage as person is not really interested in love. No, I it could be, but still us or whatever. But the fact is if you look further and further into the situation, you find that there's a lot more to what's going on than people think, and it opens up new vistas and so forth. But a lot of times, sometimes you get in situations where you keep doing something you regret. A lot of times it's because you don't really fully understand what really is the full context of what's happening. Anyways, yeah.
So the next obvious question, I guess part B, would be, how do we understand? What steps do we take to fully understand something? What Torahs? How do we start investigating things?
So the thing is I think that in many ways you have to open your mind to possibilities. That's why I started with the cases I started with. Most people define free choice as the little devil and the little angel, and they have good drives or bad drives, good concepts and bad concepts. This is a good concept, this is a bad concept. I mean, this is, it's like compassion is good, and
morality is bad.
Or whatever. The fact is that by definition immorality is bad because immorality is already
negative.
Is already
asexual desires are
okay, right. So the point is that you have to understand that compassion is a drive that we have to consider, and it generally has a positive consequence. But there are times where you have to understand that compassion can lead you off where you're supposed to go because you're compassionate. Like a person is rachum for someone who's not deserving of rachamim can lead to problems. I mean, that's the case with Shaul HaMelech. He was compassionate for King Agag, and that led to his to problems.
By cheating?
No, that's different.
Right.
Okay, the fact is that and the Shar Yasher is going to get into this also when he talks about how you want to be giving because the Kodesh Baruch Hu is giving, but basically he points out to the fact that if you have no self-interest whatsoever, you're not going to do it because you can't you have to have some level of self-interest. So he points out the fact that Chayecha Kodem, that your life has to be first, a classic, desert case, where if there's only one bottle of water, you keep it. The point is that self-concern is not always a negative value, right? There has to be things. Now, what we're going to see further is how the Shar Yasher, and this is why I think it's an excellent example to deal with it, how he is then going to extend that into a completely new perception. Okay, that shows how you see things a little bit differently. But that's the starting point. The starting point is that if you start saying this is the little devil and this is the little angel, and you don't understand that this is generally a good drive, it's generally bad, but I have to be careful not to apply it because it has to be the conclusion. And there's a whole argument in secular philosophy about what's called situational ethics. Immanuel Kant didn't like the idea of situational ethics. He felt that if something was ethical, it had to be ethical 100% of the time.
Right.
Okay. And the point is that really, what I see in halacha is very much a concept of situational ethics. Is it wrong to lie? Generally, you should be honest. Generally, you should be truthful. However, certain situations, maybe it's not a good idea to tell the truth to someone. Okay, there's situations where, like for example, there's situations. Say if an elderly man whose brother just passes away. Okay, so the point is he's an elderly man, and he says, well, this guy said Shiva now. He's got to be told his brother passed away. He said Shiva, and so forth and so forth. The halacha is you don't have to tell anyone that someone passed away. You don't have to tell them. If they find out that their mishpacha, that a close karav passed away, they have to follow Shiva. But if the person never finds out, he has no chiyuv of Shiva. So you have elderly people who basically lose a sibling and so forth, and the decision is made. Listen, let's not tell them. Why? I'll tell you an example. It's not really an example of a chiyuv of Shiva, but I'll give you a classic story that's told about the Rav. The Rav, Rav Yoshe ber Soloveitchik. There was a minhag among three gedolim: Rav Moshe, Rav Yitzchak Ruderman, and the Rav. they called each other on in other words, Rav Ruderman and the Rav used to call each other on Erev Yontif, and Rav Moshe used to call the Yeshiva Erev Yontif. Every Yontif, driving the Rav to the airport Erev Pesach, and they were on Park Avenue, and the Rav turns to him and says, Kenny, why didn't you tell me when Moshe was nifter? And she was like, said, he's a famous rabbi now, but he basically says he's like in the middle of Park Avenue. The Rav just asked, why didn't you tell him Moshe was nifter? He's just like, like shocked, slams on his brakes. I mean, like he didn't get hit by a car or whatever. And he says, no. Oh, gee whiz. I'm sure it'll come to me. Anyways, he was the first head of the Center for the Jewish Future at YU. Anyways, so he was a big Rabbi in Boca Raton before that. Anyways, so he says, because the Rebbetzin told us not to tell you. Now the Rebbetzin, what he meant was Mrs. Persky, the Reb's daughter, right? She said, don't tell the Reb. And the way they did that, it was like this was a real active thing. They said that the Rabbi used to get the New York Times every morning. All of a sudden, the New York Times had said that Moshe was nifter, which was a headline in the New York Times, because Moshe was the big rabbi in New York, right? Somehow, sorry, the paper's gone today.
This
the radio,
This for his daughter did not want him to know.
Did not know. Why? Because it was tremendous anguish for him. Now, how did he find out? So he says, so the Shamash asked him, he says, how did Rabbi find out? He says, it was Rav Moshe's turn to call me. And there's only one reason that Rav Moshe wouldn't have called me. That's it. The point of the matter is that even applies in Halachas Shiva. Okay? That if someone is really, maybe older in age and so forth, you wonder, do you tell them about a Shiva? Because there is tremendous anguish of hearing that. The fact of the matter is the halacha is such, and you look at halacha, that the fact is that you don't necessarily have a chiyuv to tell someone, but the person is, if a person hears, he's got a kid Shiva, but if he doesn't, no one tells him, he has no chiyuv Shiva. So the point is that that's a consideration in certain situations. Okay? And it comes out even in more simplistic situations where if someone passes away on a Shabbos, and there's nothing a person can do on Shabbos anyways, except feel the pain. So wait till after Shabbos and tell them. And that's the famous case of Beruria. Beruria was Ramir in the Gemara, right? Beruria was Ramir's wife, and one of their kids died on Shabbos, and Beruria didn't tell Ramir until after Shabbos. Why should I upset your Shabbos? There's nothing you can do about it. The fact of the matter is that that's where you sort of understand the mechanisms and the ideas. The point is, though, is that you have to understand the breadth of what really a halachic concept is. But it starts with looking at your drives, looking at your concepts. So you're saying, for a starting point, looking at them and saying, hey, listen, if I see a value in this, I do see a value in that. I see a value in compassion. I also see a value in self-interest. There are times where it's a little bit more complex, the answers. And once you start seeing the answers a little bit more complex, then it opens up vistas of trying to understand the whole. Halacha may tell you an answer you still may not necessarily like, but it's working with the system. Okay?